Hello, everyone, and welcome to Purpose Driven Life Skills. Today, we will be discussing relationships and boundaries, God's blueprint for healthy connections. My name is Tamar, and today's key scriptures are Proverbs 27 and 17, 1 Corinthians 15 and 33, and Amos 3 and 3, Matthew 22, 27 through 39, and Galatians 6, verse 2 and verse 5. Galatians chapter 6, verses 2 and verse 5. So, God designed us for relationships. From the beginning, God said, "It is not good for man to be alone," in Genesis 2 and 18. So we know that relationships are central to life, whether they are family, friendships, marriage, church, workplace, etc. We know that relationships can either build us up or they can drain and destroy us if boundaries are missing. Biblical relationships require both love and wisdom. Two of the greatest commandments that we received for the foundation of this text is where Jesus summarized the law. He said, love God fully in Matthew 22 and 37, and then to love your neighbor as yourself in Matthew 22 and 39. Notice loving others flows out of properly loving God and valuing ourselves. And we also know that boundaries help us practice love without enabling sin or harm. So why do boundaries matter spiritually? Well, without boundaries, we may burn out from overgiving. We can enable destructive behaviors, and we compromise our values to please people. But when we have healthy boundaries, we protect our walk with God, we preserve emotional and mental health, and we allow relationships to flourish in honesty, truth, and in respect. So, what are some biblical models of boundaries? Well, Jesus himself set some boundaries. We know that he took time away to pray in Luke 5. We know that he did not entrust himself to everyone in John chapter 2. And he confronted unhealthy behavior directly in Matthew chapter 23. We also know that Paul set ministry boundaries. He chose companions carefully, and he rebuked when needed in Galatians 2 and 11. We also know that Proverbs teaches wisdom in relationships. It says, do not make friends with a hot-tempered person in Proverbs 22 and 24. So let's talk about some principles of godly boundaries. One, we have to know our identity in Christ. Boundaries flow from knowing who you are as God's child. You are not called to be controlled by others' approval. You have to learn how to say no in love. Matthew 5 and 37 says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Saying no is not unloving. It's stewarding your time, your energy, and your calling. And then we also have to be able to differentiate between burdens and loads. Galatians 6 and 2 says, bear one another's burdens, which means we help when there's crisis. Galatians 6 and 5 says, each one should carry their own load, which means everyone is responsible for their daily choices. So we know that boundaries help to distinguish compassion from being enabling. And then we also need to surround ourselves with iron sharpening friends. Proverbs 27 and 17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. We know that godly relationships challenge us, they refine us, and they encourage you towards righteousness. So what are some practical applications that we can use? Well, let's talk about marriage. We know that boundaries protect intimacy and it keep outside influences from destroying trust. Let's talk about it in friendships. We should choose our friends who uplift us, not corrupt us, according to 1 Corinthians 15 and 33. Let's talk about family. We can love them deeply, but set limits if patterns of toxicness exist. Let's talk about church and ministry. We can serve faithfully, but rest and delegate to avoid burnout. And in our workplace, we can maintain integrity and not compromise our values for approval or promotion. So here's some questions that I would like for you to ask yourself. Do I often say yes when I really mean no? And why do I do that? Are there relationships in my life that are pulling me closer to God or away from Him? And what boundaries do I need to set to guard my peace and my purpose? So your challenge is to prayerfully evaluate one relationship in your life this week and identify if it needs a boundary time, which means do you need to set up a boundary with time, your emotional energy, or your spiritual influence? And then take one small step towards a healthier balance, whether that's a conversation, a pause, or seeking counsel. My name is Tamar with Purpose Driven Life Skills, and be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Remember, God calls us to love deeply, but also wisely. Relationships without boundaries leads to bondage, but relationships with God-centered boundaries lead to freedom, trust, and growth. Be blessed.